the building because whoever we were renting out to would take care of that.
Okay, that's a good point, and I do want to elaborate a little bit on why that was even a consideration. I do, just to reiterate, I do think that youngsters need an opportunity to get back into the general population. That's number one. Secondly, the opportunity to bring students back into the district who are currently out of district because of specialized programs is huge. And as you know, we could pay upwards of $70, $80, or $100,000 for students that we send out of district. Now, not all of those students will be able to come back, obviously. There are programs that we wouldn't be able to offer on site depending on what the needs of those students are. But to the extent that we could, there would be a significant benefit to the district to be able to do that. We do know that there would be interest in someone leasing, an entity leasing that building, at least for a period of time. Over time, I anticipate that as we fully implement this plan, we will have a resurgence of students coming back to our district. So I would caution the board about selling a building or completely taking it off our rolls for on a permanent basis, because I think in time to come we will need additional space to accommodate those folks who are returning to our district.
Just to speak about Mandela briefly, Mandela is supposed to be, now whether or not it currently truly operates as such, a school where students that have the need are strengthened there educationally speaking. So yes, a lot of those children are, we use the term troubled kids or kids in need of more attention, but to bring them over to Mandela, we're supposed to add more resources to their, in terms of, maybe we can see better how they learn, maybe they need more project-based learning, maybe they have the special attention that they need outside of a general classroom setting, and then we could, if the need, if they show a need for, let's say, CTE or vocational education, then we could easily move them on to, let's say, Mount Vernon High School, wherever, for those programs. So I think Mandela is still going to be necessary in terms of a place where we can identify students' needs to strengthen their education and then move them into the appropriate, back into the general program and moving them into the appropriate spots. A lot of children just will not do well in a general learning setting, and they need the special attention and strengthening. So yes, you could quickly make the assumption, oh, it's just a place where we throw our troubled children, but that's not the role. The role is supposed to be, this is a place where we strengthen them and we cater to their special needs and we educate them how best that they learn, right, through which they learn. So that's what it's supposed to be. Is it carried out exactly like that? Well, you would know better.
I do not believe that the program is operating at its full capacity. And I do believe that there are youngsters who do need some kind of alternative. But I think we have to be, from my perspective, very careful about creating programs that segregate our community or segregate our students or create a we versus them mentality. And as much as I would like to see youngsters get what they need, regardless to where they are on the spectrum, whether they are high flyers or those youngsters who may need additional kinds of supports and services as you described, we have to make sure that all of our kids get the full opportunity that they have. And equity and equality are two different things, and you've heard me talk about that before. Equity means that kids who need more should get more. Not everybody's going to get the same because not everybody needs the same. Right. But those who need more should get more.
I agree. My feeling is that I've never really quite understood Mandela, but with the kind of pull-out programs that I know Dr. Gorman, that you're instituting in all the schools for enrichment studies, and with the addition of our school psychologists and guidance counselors, et cetera, it seems to me with such a small population, we should be able to accommodate them in the other high schools. And I think the stigma of being at Mandela for some kids is going to create a lifelong problem for them, because I was sent to, when I was in school, we had the tracking system, and you either track 1, 2, or 3. And believe me, the people who were in 3 said, well, that's all I can do is be a 3. So I do think that renting it out, and once again, I agree, this has to be phased. Buying land to me is not an option at this point in time. We have so much real estate at this point, and we're trying to get a bond passed to fund the majority of this, the basic needs of our population, and I just don't see how we could ever get that over. I believe that we have an opportunity to beautify everything, and some places will have less green than other, but I think that's actually the reason why you don't have Mandela. Why would you buy land to go on Mandela, which is such a small population? I think that the plan, and the other thing I believe, so anyway, I really don't believe in segregating the Mandela population. I think if Ms. Gayon and her team cannot accommodate those kids' needs in the regular high schools, then they will probably be sent to an alternative program. And we send a lot of kids to alternative programs now. We're hoping to bring them back and be able to mainstream them into the least restrictive environment, which is what we're supposed to do. On the pre-K, we do have the pre-K at the high school now, and I do think it's an opportunity. We can grow that perhaps. I know it has a capacity issue, but maybe we could have a couple of pre-K locations. But I think the idea of a early learning center is fantastic. And I think that's one way we can assure that all our kids are going to get exactly the same education. They're going to get the same resources, they're going to get the same classes, because they're going to be in the same building. And I think it's much easier to control that, even though I know we've had to wrestle in just even getting K-6 curriculums to match up, because we've kind of been more of a federation than a system, and people have run their shows the way they've wanted to. So I think that my feeling is inclusion, and build this plan the way we can incorporate, make space and programming and pullouts available for every child in the city. That's just my feeling.
From my perspective, the plan looks good overall, but I am concerned about population size, and Mandela is still a problem for me as well. One of the things I'd like to hear about is, to what extent this new plan, how does it better utilize our facilities? Folks always talk about how much of our facilities sit empty.
It's under capacity.
Under capacity. And so that is the thing that comes at me when I think about acquiring more property is, well, I'm not currently using what I
Good point.
have. So there's that aspect of it. So going for a number of these facilities, going to a K-8, I think it ends up utilizing more of the space. So, and I think if you could talk on that.
I'll be glad to. What this plan will need, and I should have said this before, and I appreciate you calling my attention to it. This plan, either plan that we go with, will require the district to redistrict. That would mean that you look at the population of our students, and you look at the capacity of the buildings, and you draw the lines accordingly, so that you redistribute those youngsters. So we do have some buildings that are under capacity, but it is also true that we have some buildings like Lincoln, for instance, that's over capacity. So redistricting needs to happen regardless to which way we go with this. And there will probably need to be a couple of reiterations of the redistricting plan. For example, if we really take Parker offline, while it is being reconfigured, those kids have to go somewhere. So we would need to redistribute those youngsters across the district, at least for a period of time, while Parker School is being reconfigured. And then once that happens, we would redistrict youngsters again. But whatever plan we decide to go with, or the board decides to go with, we need to minimize the impact on kids and their families by making certain that we have a fully developed plan that minimizes the number of disruptions that youngsters have. Because as youngsters, as you know, transition from one educational program to another, we want to minimize the loss of instructional time and gains that they may have made while teachers get reacclimated, and moves always cause some level of disruption. So once we get the overall picture and we look at where our district lines are and put our buildings at appropriate capacity, then we can begin to talk about what a timetable would look like moving forward.
Thank you. And then just to follow up on that, in terms of the size of the classrooms and the number of staff needed, does that change as a result of pushing more of these buildings to K-8?
We will have the same number of students. They'll be distributed differently. The only impact I think we will have on staffing is the number of teachers we will need for our pre-K program, because there is a special certification that teachers will have to have. So I think in the grand scheme of things, even as we look at the reconfiguration through a K-8, we need to create opportunities for teachers to get specialized, because what we don't want is a fourth grade teacher becoming a seventh or eighth grade teacher and not having some content specialization in math and science and language arts literacy, because then our youngsters don't have the benefit of a true K-8 program. So there still needs to be a level of specialization. So I don't think it will change the number of staff members that we have, but it may require that we provide opportunities for teachers to gain additional accreditation and certification.
Right.
Just before you move on, I just want to as you talked about capacity levels, and I'm sorry, as you talked about capacity levels, that was my concern there with, because it looks like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong now, do you say creating I know we talked about expanding on Pennington, but now it appears, and if I heard you correct, we're talking about building a whole new facility outside of what we currently had discussed for Pennington.
That is correct.
So my question there would be related to the capacity issue. Is we talked about 6 classrooms or 8 classrooms added, and I know there's this fear of down the line with the new construction that's coming into Mount Vernon. A lot of people are concerned about how that's going to impact the Pennington school area, and I think that's something that we should consider. But I also don't want us to overthink it and begin to add in a new building. Instead of adding 8 classrooms, you add 10 or 12 or 15 classrooms, and when we're already under capacities. That's one of the reasons why we stopped using Sacred Heart, to bring back our students and to fill those seats in-house instead of spending money out of house. So by adding those classrooms to a district that's already underutilized, it's a...
Well, can I just follow up on that? I mean, can you talk a little bit more about the capacity issue specific to pre-K? Because while we're underutilized certainly in some of our buildings for other grades,
No, we
you have
definitely need pre-K.
you have to configure a building in a certain way for pre-K that's different than a 5th grade class, which I know, and I know that there's a big demand in this district for a full day pre-K, and I'm wondering if it's just at Parker. Are we going to even have enough room for the demand, or do we even know, really?
We will not. We will not have enough room just at Parker.
So we'll need a full-day
will
pre-K
need-
somewhere else.
Yes,
Yeah.
we will need, now this plan, actually, the plan that the Facilities Committee suggested actually looks at putting pre-K in several of the south portion area of the district, putting pre-K programs in there. One of the things that we talked about very briefly this morning, I need to flesh it out a little bit, is consider a north and south full-day pre-K program. So take Traphagen, for example, and make it a full-day pre-K program. Our current demographic study does not indicate that we need to be building more buildings. Now, we can anticipate certainly that we will have an influx of people coming back to the district, and I think that's a wise thing to consider. But as we present plans to the state, we have to be able to justify, according to state standards, our need for another building when buildings are under capacity. As we are currently, and as the demographic study indicates, we're not in a position that the state would consider that. But if we looked at Traphagen as a full-day pre-K or early learning center, even a full-day pre-K and K program, that may be a different way to present, if the board wants to go in that direction, building into Pennington. But again, I think we want to make certain that as we package this for our community, for our public, that we are being considerate of what the perception is if we create pre-K programs in all South Ward schools and create one center in the north side of town. What message is that we're sending? I think we have to find the appropriate balance. The concept makes sense, but we have to find the appropriate balance. And I think the Traphagen option, if the board wants to go in that direction, is a good way to package a north-south side early learning center.
Absolutely, I think one side is...
Also, what we discussed was to package pre-K and K together in some instances. So, for example, in Traphagen, you'd have pre-K and K, and maybe as Parker as well, you have to take a look at the capacities, maybe do Parker maybe pre-K in one building and spread out K through the others. But also what you would have with the Pennington facility is that you have, for example, schools such as maybe even Lincoln and Holmes that could spill into the Pennington campus for 6, 7, and 8 as you do your, first through 1 through 5 in that particular facility, which now would be great for Lincoln specifically because it would now be able to handle that capacity. The other thing that the demographic study does not show is that currently right now there's close to 3,000 students who live in Mount Vernon who don't go to Mount Vernon schools, they opt out and they go to private schools. Well, if the intent is to make the school district better, and you have even students such as my kids who go to private school, well, I'd rather save that $30,000 a year I currently spend, and I'd rather put them back to school in Mount Vernon because Mount Vernon now has the appropriate assets that would meet the needs, let's say, for these particular children. So the demographic study doesn't take that into account. So if you take that into account, if the goal here is to indeed make the schools excellent, well, then you're going to get a large amount of people who'd rather save that money because if you're paying $20,000 in taxes plus you're paying another $30,000 in private school tuition, that's effectively a $50,000 tax on property value that is currently low right now in Mount Vernon because of the schools. So you're going to gain back way many more students than you anticipate if the district goes in the direction of the educational vision that the superintendent has.
But that's
And
all.
I think that's also, though, a vision for the South Side, because in campaigning, walking door to door, I met a ton of families that sent their kids to
Absolutely.
Catholic school. It may not be the $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 a year school, but $10,000 is a significant amount of money for anyone to send their kids to school. And so we do have to think about those families that could potentially send back their kids to schools on the South Side in creating a better school system.
Well, yeah, sure, it's everywhere. So
Yeah.
it's not even a north side, south side issue. It's
It's
a
all,
it's
yeah.
a
Yeah.
homeowner tax family issue that affects us all in the district. So by creating more space in all the schools and sort of like some redistricting happening, and also of course the importance of the pre-K. I can't even tell you the full day pre-K it's definitely needed throughout the
No,
district.
absolutely.
So again, I think that quickly our assets will be filled, and if we
Leave room.
plan correctly and we plan smart, then we should plan instead of adding 5 classrooms now, add another patch it up with another 5 classrooms later, and then another 5, and then you have a lot of hodgepodge. It's better to plan smart, let's say for the next 10 years, 15 years. The other thing, one more thing, is that currently the assets that you have in terms of the cafeteria space, the auditorium space, and the gym space over at Pennington, when you add a 7th and 8th grade capacity over there, you're taxing like right now the cafeteria is already, it's already scheduled for, let's say, the K through 6, right? Now you're adding 7th and 8th graders as well. And now you add, so if it's, let's say, 5 or 6 classrooms, okay, maybe it can handle it, but now you add another 5 or 6 classrooms, and now you have an auditorium that used to be a cafeteria, I believe, but it's not even a proper auditorium. And then now, some kids would probably have lunch at 3 o'clock, right? By the time you distribute the lunch hours throughout, it would be, let's say, potentially pre-K all the way through 8th grade. When is the 8th grade are gonna eat lunch? So you really have to think about that as well. The current assets, those assets in terms of cafeteria, auditorium, gym space. When are they going to use those facilities? What grades and when? And whether it may not be wiser to build a facility that can handle all of that within one building. And now you could take other capacities from the other schools and drop it into that as well, and really take full advantage of that. And also, you're creating another institution or school that could really compete a lot with the private schools. Just the same way you have the campus at Longfellow or Rebecca and Benjamin Turner, you have a elementary building, and then you have a, let's say, middle school building, but it's K through 8, but it's on one campus. So whether the building's attached or separated, that's just really semantics there, and whether it works or not. But separating it allows you to build additional assets in terms of cafeteria, auditorium, and gymnasium to really make it a first-rate institution.
Leslie, I'm losing track here. What are you proposing exactly? You're talking about Pennington specifically?
We're talking about Pennington specifically here in terms of why does it need to be a different building, And one of the reasons.
Why does what need to be a different building?
Oh, instead of a, let's say, 6 classroom or 8 classroom extension, why does it need to be a separate
Why
building?
does what need to be a separate building? The pre-K program?
No, the
Pennington
build out of
building,
Pennington.
Pennington building.
The one that we're already
That would-
planning.
Planning, correct.
Right.
No, if
So-
I think I understand your question. So the second proposal that came from the facilities was not just an addition to Pennington, as we previously discussed, but building an annex, so to speak.
For pre-K?
No.
No,
Not
Or
pre-K.
the 6, 7, and
I see.
8 component of that population.
So
I have a
we'll go-
question. What is our total capacity, if you look at this schematic as it is, or even with Mandela offline, what does this represent in terms of what the architects, the visioning, in terms of, I mean, we probably don't know down to the student. What does this represent in terms of capacity right now?
You're talking about the adding a
previous.
6, 7, 8 Pennington?
No, prior to that, what does our capacity tell us?
Okay. Ken, do you know that answer off the top of your head?
Well, we figured 25 classes, 25 children per class.
Right?
And then we did the math of all the classrooms available in all the K-8 buildings.
Right?
And it came out really right with Parker offline. It came out to fit exactly what we need. But we do need a few extra classrooms at Pennington. And having, if you had 6 classrooms, that would do it. If you had 8 classrooms, that would allow for future expansion. But that has nothing to do with what Mr. Zamor is suggesting. And let me just say that Mr. Zamor is suggesting something, he's not suggesting that for now. He's suggesting that for some time in the not too distant future, but not today. He's not suggesting another building today, he's suggesting an expansion of Pennington today.
But I'm still not
That's
understanding.
That's in addition to the addition
Yeah.
of the building?
But what I still don't understand is right now we have 80-some hundred students in our school district attending our schools. And we supposedly have a capacity for 11-ish, 11 to 12,000. What does this plan do to our capacity? Is this planned to just 8,300? Is it planned to 10,000? Is it planned to expand to 12? What is the plan?
This plan.
I can't get my head around that.
This plan, keep in mind, our pre-K universe is about 745 kids.
Right.
So we right now have 8,431 kids in our district on our rolls.
Right.
And if you add another 740 kids from our pre-K, you're looking at
9,000.
a little over 9,000 students.
Still have to.
Are we maxed out at 9,000 students
Yeah.
in this plan? So what I'm asking is how much room do we have to grow in this plan before we start thinking about how many kids are going to come back to district or stay in district beyond kindergarten and first and second grade? That's the question. That's what we need to know, and I don't understand that.
Well, I think what we need to speak to is where is the capacity? So a lot of the capacity, for example, in those numbers is at the Mount Vernon High School.
True.
So you're not going to start taking pre-K and elementary school kids and start sending them to Mount Vernon High School, especially when you're trying to build a comprehensive program over there. So you have to understand where the capacity is. The capacity is certainly not at Lincoln. Capacity is not at Holmes. Capacity is not at Graham, and so on and so forth. So you can start thinking about where exactly the capacity is. And once you start taking schools, let's say like Traphagen offline to make it pre-K and K, well now all the rest of the first through 1 through 5, or actually 1 through 6, has to go somewhere. So now probably that universe of, let's say, all of Traphagen, which I think currently serves Chester Hill Park, Elmsmere, and probably Chester Heights as well, now has to fall somewhere, and that would be falling into Pennington. So that would be, let's say, falling into possibly, let's say the 6 additional classrooms that you build now, they'd probably, let's say, go there, which now still means that you need capacity for 7th and 8th graders, or 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
But I still would like to see the numbers by the buildings. I
Well, let
still
me-
like
let-
to understand how we are, how we are planning. Are we planning on a 10 or 20% increase in student attendance from, pulling it back from parochial? I mean, I think we might need some consulting. I know we've done demographic studies, but in terms of where is that population going to come from, is going to come more from the people who are spending $8,000 or $10,000 sending their kids to parochial school versus the people who can afford to spend $30,000 to send their kids to. So this is just where I'm I just need more detail.
Okay, so
because-
let me, if I can encourage the board to let's work on concept. And then I think as we move forward, we can give some direction to the architects. And at our next meeting, our intent is to present, once you give us some direction, to present what is the capacity, what would a timetable look like, what would the price tag look like, and then the board can say, you know what, we need to scale this back, or we can go ahead and do an addition in Pennington, et cetera. What I would like the conversation tonight to be about is, does the board support full-day pre-K centers? Does the board support expansion of K-8 configuration? Does the 3 specialized high schools make sense in terms of an educational vision? And if we're in agreement on that, then let's begin to talk about how do we plan for Mandela? Are we keeping it open or taking it offline? And then are we looking to, what are we going to do at Pennington? I think those are the unknowns, if you will, though we may need some more guidance from our consultants and the architects that we have at our disposal.
Can you just talk briefly about what are the necessary upgrades to expand K-8 district-wide, both for our benefit and for the benefit of the public who's listening and watching, about what it takes to turn everything into K-8 and the renovations that would happen at every single school throughout the district?
Great question. And I didn't want the architects to speak tonight, but they may be better able to. I'm going to try. Just if I fumble, pick it up for me. At our K-8 buildings, we would really be looking specifically at outfitting our buildings with a state-of-the-art science lab. So all of those buildings would need, even the newer buildings would need some modifications in order to accommodate a state-of-the-art science program. Our pre-K buildings, or the buildings that we're looking at for pre-K, will require a lot of renovations associated with building toilet rooms.
Sure.
For pre-K youngsters, so that the bathrooms are either in the classrooms or in close proximity. So that's a significant undertaking. The other buildings, like the 3 high schools, for instance, it would require Thornton that auditorium needs to be completely rehabbed. For example, there needs to be more work done for science accommodations there. A.B. Davis would need some additional work associated with creating the appropriate programs for technology. And that's the other thing, too. All this has to be coordinated with building the infrastructure associated with the Smart Bond and infusing technology in as well. So this is a huge coordination of effort as well. So that's another piece that we can't minimize as we talk about what these schools will need in order to be able to accommodate the vision that we're putting forward this evening. But the most significant impact in terms of construction, of course, the fields, which is a huge undertaking in and of itself, but the science rooms and our K-8 configurations would be a huge consideration.
And we're considering the fields at majority of all of our facilities that currently have fields.
That is correct.
Upgrade of fields at
That is
every
correct.
facility in this district.
Yes.
Yeah, there's, if I can speak to that for a second, a lot of the schools, again, from years of neglect, the fields are definitely in need of significant improvement. Specifically, even if, let's not call it field necessarily, but as you saw the visual over at Graham, Graham really needs to be properly reconfigured, and a lot of money has to go there to make that building a place of excellence. So it's going to be a lot of money spent there, and also at Parker to really make that a first-rate pre-K learning center. And then going back to the fields behind Davis and the high school, of course, are huge fields, and those are very important, as the superintendent mentioned, regarding competitive sports. So, and then going back to other assets such as the Thornton Auditorium and making that school an excellent performing arts center. So really the bond would touch almost every single school, actually not almost, it would touch every single school in the district. And because the goal here is excellence throughout the entire district. That's the goal. And for us to achieve that, right now we're starting some initiatives in curb appeal, but you can't plant some chrysanthemums in front of, let's say, Graham and change that, right? That universe, it really needs the proper restructuring. It really needs a proper amount of money to be set aside to do that right. So, throwing a couple of chrysanthemums in front of Graham doesn't fix the problem.
The other thing I want to put on the table for the board as we consider this plan is, our goal is to recognize that we are creating a plan that will outlive all of us. What we are presenting this evening is about really rebranding and reshaping and restoring Mount Vernon, not just for the sake of Mount Vernon, but for the sake of the youngsters who live in our community and the youngsters that are yet to even come to our community, because they deserve more and we should be providing them with more. Now, we have an edict, right? So people want Mount Vernon to be a better place. They want our schools to be better. They want quality educational programs, but they also want their taxes to remain low. We can't have both. We have to decide, what do we want for our children? What do we want for this community? And then what is the price we're willing to pay?